I'm going to introduce now the final presenter for today is Marissa Jordan. She's with Evidn, which is a behavioral science group based out of Australia, but they've been doing quite a lot of work here in New York over the last few years, particularly in this area with the Owasco project. So I'm sure she'll talk more about that. So I don't need to spend any more time. So here she is. Thanks for coming today.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just right here. It's good.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I just want to thank everybody for being here, coming back after lunch. Delicious barbecue, by the way. I'm Marissa. I work for Evidn. We're going to be talking a little bit about the behavioral science of agricultural practice change. So a little bit different than some of the presentations we've seen, but I'm going to try to link them in so it's all relevant. But before we get into it, I'll just give you a little bit of my background. Like I said, my name is Marissa. I grew up in Galway, which is, if anybody knows, like Saratoga, it's that way. If we have any racing fans here, that's a lot of my childhood. I grew up on a horse farm, worked on a number of thoroughbred breeding farms, showed chickens at the county fair every year. I won every time. Turns out that was like the cool thing to do back then, but kids have phones now, so not as much anymore. So I also love water. Now I live in right outside Cooperstown, which if anybody knows, Otsego Lake is right there. Very, very popular lake. It's a beautiful little place to be. Yep. And then, yeah, agriculture. My professional experience after college has been mostly psychology. I have a 4-year degree in psych and have done a lot in behavioral sciences and human services as well. I worked for my local county as a child protective worker. So a lot of different experiences. So the opportunity to meld psych and agriculture in this role has been really, really interesting to me. So that was me. I'll give you a little bit more about Evidn. Like Aaron said, we're a behavioral sciences consulting firm based out of Brisbane, Australia. Sorry, I don't have the cool accent. I'm not from Australia. The rest of my team sounds really interesting and cool. So at some point, I'm sure a number of you have met members of my team before. Our founders really felt strongly that behavioral science can be applied to just about any situation because decisions are in everything that we do. Why do you drive the car that you drive? Why do you put the shirt on that you put on? It all comes down to our decision making. And wouldn't it be great if we could understand that and then try to change it to make positive change? So I'll give you a little bit more background of what behavioral science is. Behavioral science is, excuse me. Don't worry about that. Behavioral science is a bit of a mashup of a couple different areas of study. It's psychology, it's anthropology, it's sociology, behavioral economics. It's a little bit of everything. I like to think of it as the step past the psychological understanding of decision making, as we then use that information to inform and create positive change. If that makes sense. Oh, and I didn't say before, but if anybody has any questions, same rule, just raise your hand and we'll chat about it. So we have a couple tenets here of our behavioral science principle, especially when applying to the agricultural practice change. I think we can all agree that people are at the heart of agriculture and at the heart of what's going to create change. So, rather than bringing up all the different scientific sides of things and what might be the best option, it's really important to also think about the people, and understanding that decision can be really, really important. So then we talk about behavioral science and a little bit about what it is, but how does that apply to agriculture? I know we've heard in here, we hear soil sciences, we hear water quality, we hear riparian buffers, nutrient management, all of these things. And New York especially is in a very unique situation in dealing with agriculture. We're in a very interesting time where changes are occurring, and it's just a matter of how we can make that happen, because it's very clear, especially in the Owasco watershed, that change is wanted. And that's huge, and just that people want to see things change. Make sure I said everything. Perfect. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about decision making. We all like to think that we make decisions rationally. We use facts. We use, logic. Long-term investment, things that we want to do for ourselves. But is that actually how we make our decisions all of the time? Not always. So we tend to lean towards irrational decision-making. Our brains use shortcuts a lot more than we would like to think. It's not only with decision-making, and our eyes play tricks on us. All of these things that our brain has developed to protect us or help us inform our environment. So we might think that we're making rational decisions when we might actually be using irrational factors. My favorite example of this is something that everybody's probably done. Raise your hand if you've gone to the grocery store hungry. Yeah, so I'm going to guess that you probably spent quite a bit more money when you go to the grocery store hungry and you come home with a lot of snacks that you don't need. I know I don't need a gallon of ice cream in my fridge every night. But so, some people do. I'm into it. I love it. But we always think that we're making rational decisions, but that might not always be the case. So, the irrational decision for the grocery store example is, you're thinking in the short term because you're hungry right now, and you're thinking in the short term, you didn't make a plan, and you're hungry. Your emotion is you're hungry. You might be a little bit hangry, grumpy with the store owner. But if you use some rational decision-making tactics, like make a list before you leave, have a snack to plan for the long term because you're going to get hungry, you're likely to keep your bill down and the less snacks out of your kitchen. Does that make sense for everybody? Perfect. Awesome. I'm going to show you a quick video. This is a really fun video to show how other people affect our behaviors. So hopefully you guys can hear it. By clicking it, hold on. I might be showing you a video. What if I click the thing? Oh,
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this, or would you? After just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
it is.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there.
Perfect. So that's a really great example. It feels a bit cruel. It's a great example of how the people around us can affect our behavior. The extended cut of the video, I wanted to show the whole thing, but it's a bit long. But they introduce more people that aren't aware of the project or the study that's going on, and she actually trains a group of people to then do the same thing. Wow. So they send one more man in, the beep goes off, she stands up, he says, "Why are you doing that?" She says, "I don't know, everybody else was doing it." And then the two of them train the rest of the group that gets sent in to then do this. So it's really interesting to think about, because this woman barely asked any questions, just started doing her thing, and then trained a whole other group of people to adopt this behavior. And these are people she doesn't even know. So imagine the influence that our friends and family have on us, and our neighbors, and local soil and water districts, and the people around us affect us. And this is, we got her to stand up a bunch of times without even knowing anybody. So it's an interesting thing to think how much we're affected by the people around us. So to talk a little bit more about that, this is a behavioral system that was designed by a prominent psychologist, Bronfenbrenner. I'm not going to quiz you on the names, but he theorized that there's 3 main levels of influence. There's our individual level, there's our group level, and the macro level. So that video was a really great example of the group level, it's the people that are directly around you. Individual can be anything from your age, your gender, where you live, where you grew up. And then the macro level can be things like politics, which you're watching on TV. COVID was a really big external factor that affected everybody. I don't think we would have so many virtual people if COVID hadn't been a thing. We wouldn't even be having virtual, presentations and stuff. So it's really interesting to think about. Can anybody give me I'll make you guys interact with me a little bit after lunch. Can anybody give me a influence at either any one of the levels that they feel influences them or the people that they know?
Yeah, I used to hang out with international students when I was in graduate school, and they didn't like to stand for the national anthem in baseball games. Used to get a lot of abuse at that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Did they stick to it or did they eventually
Stuck to it,
adopt?
yeah.
Okay. Very good. So that tells me that that's a very strong cultural value that they hold. And as long as they're with, their own people, they're not going to adopt the thing that we do where we stand for the beat, essentially.
I thought it was an interesting conversation where people would, ask them to stand and then berate them because they didn't give up their freedom of expression to respect freedom of expression.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's all these rules that we think we have, and then there's all these subconscious rules that are also come into play, right? I sort of always make the joke that now that I work with Evidn, everyone is mostly Australian. I make the joke that my professional influence, I'm picking up some of the words that they use. So I'm starting to grab little bits of things like that. And that's all at a subconscious level. And then one day I realize I'm saying keen or across in the ways that they use them. So it's an interesting thing to think about. All of these levels or any factor in this level can be broken down into a driver or a barrier for change, right? Because that's what we're here to talk about, is how we can use all of this information to then create positive, lasting change. So let's talk a little bit about drivers and barriers. Drivers and barriers for change. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, right? A driver is something that is pushing you towards change, facilitating change. A barrier is anything that is trying to stop up progress, essentially. I like to think of it as a balanced scale. On one side, you have your drivers, you have your barriers on the other side. A lot of people think that the best way to create lasting change is to just really weigh down heavy on the drivers and really just sell the benefits of what we're doing. But what we've shown, the evidence supports the best way to actually help make change is to reduce the barriers. So rather than adding on to the one side of the scale, we're taking off of the other side. So you're getting the same, result. You're just doing it a little bit differently, making it easier for people to create change and sort of get that ball rolling towards the driving forces. So then how does this all, why am I here in the Owasco watershed? How does this all connect? Our company Evidn was brought into the Owasco project in 2019 by the Nature Conservancy. Since then, we have worked with a number of soil and water districts, other watershed associations, and other identified stakeholders to help understand the attitudinal sort of changes that are happening and what drivers and barriers are out there. So we can talk about the different drivers and barriers specifically. These are some of the drivers and barriers that we have identified here in the Owasco watershed. So it's driving forces are things like, anybody, it's not just farmers, but everybody wants to be viewed positively. Everybody wants to think that they're, doing the right thing, they're on the right track. That feeling in and of itself is a driver for change because, you want to be doing the right thing. You don't want to be viewed as a villain. Another driver that we've identified is just having soil and water conservation districts here is huge. You guys are a wonderful resource for all of the farmers and stakeholders in your areas to be able to get information, understand what's out there, and be able to make the change. Just another driving force I really like a lot is the AIM framework. Everybody probably knows AIM, Advancing Environmental Management. But we at Evidn felt that was a really prominent framework and have used it to continue to help with as a driving force for change. Right along with that, there's always restraining or barriers for change. One that always sticks out to me is the lack of recognition and acknowledgement from farmers. I think it's all pretty clear. Everybody kind of knows that farmers are frustrated, and they, the non-ag community likes to paint the devil horns on the farmer, right? And that he's the one dumping the manure and doing all of this stuff. But when you actually get on the ground, we get to see all of this great work that's actually being done, and the farmers aren't feeling that recognition. So if they're saying, why is it everybody's going to say that I'm, the bad guy anyway, why am I going to bother? It's a great example of a barrier. Another barrier is loss aversion. Nobody likes to take a risk because they don't, you never know if it's going to pay off. So, it's a scary thing to take a risk and try something new. That's a barrier. And just to chat about another one, the soil health science that's so complex that some people can feel that it's too much to learn. It's overwhelming, and it causes just avoidance altogether. So rather than saying, I can do this, they don't have enough confidence to say, I know how to do this, I can make this change. They just avoid it altogether. So that causes a barrier as well. There we go. So then here in our Owasco project, we have a couple of different project goals. The very first goal is we want to communicate what's actually happening on farm. So if we can go on farm and see what's happening with farmers and all of the great work that's being done in the watershed, we can then bring that information to the non-ag communities, spread that information, and help break down that barrier of the lack of acknowledgement and the frustration felt by farmers. So that's like a direct example of how we can do that. We also build capacity and confidence for practice change with farmers, landowners, extension staff, and SWCS staff as well, to help people feel more comfortable with the idea of practice change and how we can get there without it feeling so foreign. Because same as soil health science, it feels like a really big task. But if you start taking it apart and building confidence, you can get there. So then we do a bit of community engagement to try to increase trust, both with the non-ag and ag communities and other watershed organizations. And then the ultimate goal of our project is to be able to build a solution to help create lasting change, with the hope that we can expand it to other watersheds and help to create lasting change in other watersheds as well. Because I think we can all agree our water is such a resource here and we have to protect it. So this all sounds great, right? But how do we do that? We have a few strategies. We have 3 core strategies for the behavioral change progress here in our Owasco project. Number 1, we do I'll just give you a preview and then we're going to go through all of them. We do some farmer innovation networks, community coaching, change communications, where we're engaging both on the ground, virtually, in text, in newspapers and outreach and stuff like that to really get the word out about what's going on. There we go. For the farmer innovation networks, we trialed bringing together farmer panels to get more information about priorities. We really like to know what is happening, in the minds of farmers. We want to know what's important to them. If we're building a project that has to do with, something that's not important to the farmers, there's no buy-in because they don't feel that that's something they need to focus on. So we really try to stay within the community the best that we can. The local soil and water districts have been phenomenal at helping us get on ground because they already have trust with the farmers. And that's a great way for us to keep the ball rolling. Because if we can keep the farmers feeling that we are listening to them and we are tailoring our approach, we can keep them involved. And just another little bit, these are a great way to help us continue to identify drivers and barriers and help to tailor our approach. The great thing about behavioral science is it can be applied to just about any situation, and it's always flexible, it's always moving, it's always interesting. So we really like to make sure that we're staying on the ball of what is the priority out in the community. The second strategy that was, did you have a question?
Can I ask a question before you? I don't want to.
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yeah, that's fine. No, you're fine.
From this perspective, I think of it from an extension standpoint of there are farmer leaders and there are farmers that always come to conferences and to meetings and they want to learn, they want to do better. How do we get the farmers that don't show up at these events?
Sure.
Don't come to field days and don't come to grower meetings?
Sure. So
maybe you're gonna talk about that.
No, that's totally fine. That's, yeah, that's like, I can work that into this one.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way that we do that, because part of our, the second prong of our strategy is the farmers leading change. So we are able to help identify those prominent farmers that are coming to things and the ones that are leaders of the community. I'm sure everybody can think of the one leader in their community that, you know, drives a lot of change, is involved in a lot of things. We like to work with those people as best we can, because those are the influential people on the ground, right? You guys don't know me. I'm not your influential person. So having me show up on the farm and look at the cows and the soil health is not going to push you towards change. It's the conversations you're having with the people that you trust. It's the prominent farmers in the area that are helping to change that. People that are against change can be a bit more difficult. They take a bit longer to get them in, you know, get the change sort of rolling with them. The sort of the answer that I'll give you to how do we get those involved that aren't necessarily interested in being involved is we focus on the people that want to be involved first, make sure that it's a program that is sustainable and that we are making steps towards the right, you know, progress of change. And a lot of times we'll either see some of those farmers start to adopt things on their own because of the behaviors they're seeing in their communities. So it's not me telling them, you need to do this because of X, Y, and Z. It's them seeing that their neighbor, you know, used biochar, and now all of a sudden their fields are doing much better, you know, so it's a bit more, a little bit of osmosis. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the rest of the second prong approach, or the second strategy of our 3-strategy approach here, is that we like to do as much bridging the gap between farmers and, you know, like ag and non-ag as we can. I think we can all kind of agree that the more technology we get, the more removed the non-ag consumer becomes from their food. Most people think food comes from a grocery store now. They don't see the rest of it. So we like to get on farm and write articles about what's happening to be able to get that out to the community so that people are becoming more aware. Because you can't just force change with just one community. You need everybody to have some sort of a buy-in to be able to get somewhere. So we also, in this, we work directly with farmers. We also work with staff such as yourself. We put on, have put on a number of webinars and in-person presentations and such to help build confidence and capacity around behavioral change. Because like we said, it's a pretty foreign concept to a lot of people. So we like to familiarize people with it so that they can use it in their field of study. This is just an example of a presentation that we gave. It was behavioral science principles for outreach and communication. It was specifically in text communication. So Paul had asked earlier a question about how can we better engage members to maybe want to join, you know, soil and water districts or other watershed groups, or how can we get people to buy in? And a great way to do that is to really take a look at the media that you're putting out. And are you using language that's inclusive? Are you using we language, saying, you know, we would love to have you involved, or we would love to have more ideas or people engaged, instead of, because when you use the we language, you're breaking down the us versus them mentality. You're making everyone into one in-group rather than several different out-groups. We also talked about how important it can be. Everyone thinks the best way to sell, you know, something is to sell the science of it, talk about all of the great things that have happened, all of the numbers, the percents that have gone up. But that's, like we've talked about earlier, we don't rely on rational decision-making strategies. We don't always rely on facts and figures. We rely on the things that make us feel something. So if you're in your communications using less facts and figures and using more of a emotion-evoking approach, you'll get more people involved, because when people feel something, they do something. So you want to get people feeling and involved to be able to make that change. We also talked a bit about group identities, but we'll breeze over that. This is just a little bit of the feedback that we've gotten. Some of the presentations that we've done, we got this really good quote in the bottom left, just where a trainee felt that they, after a few of our webinars, felt that they were better able to understand and communicate with the different groups that they're working with. And that's our goal. We're here to help everyone communicate. We all want change. We just have to figure out how to get there. And then we're doing a clicker. The last of the three-prong approach is the change communication. So this is what I was sort of hinting at earlier. We love to get on farm and really see what's going on, learn the stories of the families that own these farms and get that out to the community. Because like I said, feelings and things that evoke feelings are the things that make changes. So we can say, 17 farmers are doing 30% better, or we can say, Jake and John are doing more, cover cropping or whatever they're doing. And this is the benefits that they're seeing. So we love to get on farm, get those stories and get them out to the community. That being said, if anybody has some really cool projects that they are interested in having featured in primarily in the Owasco watershed, please reach out, contact me. We love doing that stuff. I love seeing cows and doing the whole thing. So we have a dog at home now, so I don't get to see all of it anymore. My horse lives away, which is fine. Anyway. These are some examples of that. This is what they can look like. We reach a lot of stakeholders this way, which is great. To really get that out there. And then, if my neighbor sees that we wrote up a story about his farm, his neighbor might be interested in having a story featured as well. And then you've sort of got the ball rolling. And then, so just to wrap up, we really feel that the energy here is changing. And, just the fact that people want change is a great driver. Like that is, you can't, like the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So the fact that everybody here wants change is a great step forward. And we're excited to be a part of it. And again, it's not us, it's not Soil and Water, it's not, the other watershed associations. It's all of us coming together to break down barriers and create the opportunity for change to happen. We're not necessarily making change. We're not forcing change, but we are removing those barriers. And by removing those barriers, we are creating conditions where change can occur. With that, does anybody have any questions? Awesome.
So I'm a little confused about the value of feeling-based motivations.
Sure.
In the beginning of the conversation, going to the store hungry, bad idea. But then more towards the middle, you were saying you should use feeling-based materials in order to get them to make correct decisions. In Owasco Lake, I suspect that it's the facts that I think will probably should hold sway, but they are not as feeling-based as some emotions you might run into from, say, Lake Association members.
Sure.
So how do you get them to put away their feelings
Sure.
that are driving their behavior, and then kind of get them to look at the cold, hard facts, and hope that will change their attitude?
Sure. So if I can just.
Can you repeat the question somewhat?
Yes. I'm going to try. So the question was that we talked about how emotions can influence our decisions and how we might want to use that. And then how do we get people to come past their emotions, right? And be able to look at the facts and figures and see what's going on, correct? So if I can just clarify the first little bit of that, we tend to make decisions with our irrational decisions making. We don't necessarily want to be doing that, but that's how a lot of people do it. So if you're wanting to, and people that haven't heard my presentation or haven't looked into behavioral science don't realize that all of these irrational decisions or irrational factors are impacting their decision. So if we can almost use that as like a way to get into their, into their ideas and start getting them thinking, that's what we do. Does that make sense? You sort of have to tailor your approach to who you're talking to. So if you're working with a watershed group that is very much like, stick in the mud, we are not gonna cooperate. You want to pick out the pieces that are important to them, try to connect on those, and then move forward, rather than just butting heads the entire way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I once had a meeting in another county where there was a storage going in, and the neighbors rose up against it, and at the meeting, they were presented with a panel of experts and a lot of information. as to all the benefits and how it's actually good for water quality
Sure.
and the rest of it. And just fell on deaf ears because they were not interested in hearing the facts. So we're really just
Sure.
interested in feeding off of there.
They're sort of entrenched in their own
Yeah.
ideas, right? Yeah,
Really-
and that's unfortunately something that we're always gonna run into people like that. But if we can, just continue sort of to bounce off the question from earlier, if we can continue to just remove the barriers for change and allow the prominent members to start making that change, you'll get people in and eventually they'll see the benefits. So unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all, it's a very tailored approach. But if you're interested, we can have a longer conversation about it for sure. And we can talk specifically. It's a little bit easier when I have a little bit more detail. Anybody else?
I just think it's interesting in that, and we've joked for years that we need a psychologist on staff.
Sure.
Because you're dealing with so many different personality types, like government personality, farm personality. It's just,
Absolutely. And the way that I meant to bring it back to your point earlier, Tim, was that you make one decision, it affects 5 other decisions. So if you have one conversation with a person from a watershed group, it's going to, have a trickle down effect to a certain extent. So it's a really it would be beneficial. Behavioral science can be applied to everything because it's really important to not only think about what you're saying, but who it's affecting, who you might be alienating, how much further down the line it's going to go. You know what I mean? And it's all stuff that you guys have dealt with forever. So
for everybody, it's like a paradigm shift of how we're thinking about
correct.
our work.
Yep. And I feel like we're becoming more self-aware just as a population. We're realizing the things that are affecting us. So that helps as well. Like I identify, I want to change certain things. That's a driver for me. If I go to the grocery store and I end up with a pack of gummies, that's a barrier. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Anybody else?
This isn't really a question, I guess, but maybe it is. So it seems like sort of you're saying to attach the positive emotions to maybe some of the facts and stuff that he's referring to. Like if they're not responding to the facts that you're giving them, try to, affiliate it with a positive emotion so that they might care.
Absolutely.
About the facts or
Absolutely.
listen to the facts.
Yes. So it's a lot of, like I said, it's a lot of tailoring your approach. And we're people, not everything, it's trial and error, a lot of it. Part of my professional experience was in child protective services. And that's a lot of just trying to see what's going to work with what family to get them to change their behavior so that they can be, positive parents. And it's different with every family. It's different with every soil and water group. It's different with every watershed agency. And that would be the benefit of having like a psychologist on staff to be able to know all of those people and know the players and then help play. Does that answer your statement, I guess? Okay. Perfect. If we have no more questions, I will conclude.
Do we have any more questions?
Were there any online?
No, there was none online, but I did want to put a couple people on the spot, either Jason or Forrest, because we do have some innovative farmers with us that did make some major changes and are actually, so Forrest is part, and I didn't tell you I was going to do this because I didn't plan it. So sorry to put you on the spot, but I know you're up for this. So Forrest is part of the demonstration farm network in Western New York. And so his farm has been lifted up as an example of what we'd like to do. But I was wondering, for you on your journey, what were some of the influences that you had? And Jason's also part of a large farm and maybe he could jump into, but I was interested in Forrest because you're actually one of the people that we lift up to say, we would like you to farm like this.
I mean, that's a bit of a tough question, I guess, but I would attribute some of it to just the way I was taught to think, being homeschooled my whole life, and I decided that college wasn't really for me. I could learn how to farm by doing it and getting paid. And I think that for me anyway, just left a lot of boundaries open that, I wasn't taught how to think about something. It was more analyzing what was in front of me and making a decision on that versus, this is what farmers do today, and this is how you're supposed to do it. So I think that just for me left a lot of openings to question what people were doing and why things were presented, oh, we don't do that because this reason, or. So I would say that's quite a bit of it, and then I was. The first year I attended like the National No-Till Conference, there was just a lot of people that were presenting. A lot of it was facts, but also opinions on what was happening on their farm with certain practices, and that was powerful to me, just seeing what was possible, and getting maybe the same job done with less effort and time. So I think those are kind of some of the major reasons.
Thank you for sharing that. What about your farm? Jason?
I think the environment helps. With change, as far as, from me as a kid. I was talking to Debbie earlier about, we used to plow everything that we had, and we'd go out and pick earthworms for fishing and seagulls, and now that I've seen some fields today, they're plowed. There's no earthworms, there's no seagulls, a change would have to occur at some point, and we've changed over, since we've owned the farm back in the 1900s. So I think over time, farms do change, and there's reasons for that change, either it's economically, it's whether it's whatever. I mean, we've been farting around since '99 with trying to reduce our tillage load just to save some fuel costs, to save on fertilizer, to save on, labor and this and the other thing. And we've been pretty successful in increasing our, doubling our organic loads, reducing that fertilizer cost, reducing the fuel, reducing everything in the toolbox. And we're at a point where we go, well, what do we do next? What can we incorporate into the program to change again? I think it makes it easy when you have $4 to $6 fuel costs, and the price of nitrogen is $1,200 a ton. The change may come easier, but what that change is, I think it depends on what you're doing. I'm all cash drained, so my change may be a little different than my neighbor who's a large CAFO operation. It has to do some more tillage than I do because he has to incorporate some manures and whatnot. And I'd like the manure, but I don't. I do and I don't. The trade-off. So, but yeah, I think change is inevitable. Just depends on how the mindset of the landowner, or the son or the grandson, that can help with that offset and change. My dad always says he's got stories of where he knew there was a party that night, but he's stuck in the field all day because he's made 15 passes over the field because that's how his dad wanted it. And he got to the point where, why can't we cut it down to 5 passes? And my grandfather would lose his marbles because I didn't do that. You had to do it this way to get it the way he wanted it to. And then over time, I come in to play and I said, well, why don't we knock that down to 2 passes or 1 pass? Well, oh my God, you're crazy. And now we're at that stage right now where we're only doing a 1 pass unit, and I'm in and out, I'm done. So, saving him time is the major thing, because I work here at the district, so I can't always come home. But when I do come home, I can help. So I think change is inevitable. Just depends on how folks want to change, or do they want to change? Or I understand being stuck in a way, because I have a garden that I still plow. Just because I like the smell. It's an antique tractor, it's an antique plow, it's bringing the past forward still, so that my son can see that this is what we used to have, this is what we have now. So.
And plowing is just cool.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. Yes, exactly. There's so many things I could say to Paul right now. Anyway, all right, well, I think, any comments on any of that?
Oh, no, I think it sounds great. Yeah, I'd love to hear the good things that are going on. So thank you for that. You guys didn't have any time to prepare, so thanks.
Yeah, so thank you very much for coming.
Of course, thank you.